They deactivated me at 9:40 at night over a bag of groceries I had photographed sitting on the customer's own welcome mat, and it took them 1 hour and 0 human beings to erase 6 years of my life. So when the support agent, or the robot wearing an agent's name, told me to follow the documentation policy exactly, I want you to understand that I am a machinist by trade. And telling a machinist to follow the specification exactly is not the threat you think it is. It is, in fact, the only language I have ever fully trusted. So I did. I followed it exactly. I followed it so exactly that a year later a woman in their fraud department told me, a little unnerved, that she had never in her career seen a case documented down to that level. Let me back all the way up, because the number that matters here is not 6 years. It is 4. 4 missing orders. Hold on to the 4. My name is Wes. I am 44 years old, and for 20 years I was a machinist at a parts plant on the east side of Houston. If you do not know what a machinist does, the short version is that I made metal parts to tolerances you cannot see with your eye. The difference between a part that works and a part that fails measured in thousandths of an inch. And I was good at it. Quietly. The way men of my kind are good at things, without a lot of talk. 20 years. I could hear a machine going wrong 3 days before it broke. I trained the young guys. I had a badge and a locker and a nickname and a pension that was going to be just enough. And then, 3 years back, the company decided that the parts I made could be made cheaper somewhere on the other side of the world. And one Friday in the spring, they gathered us in the break room and used the words strategic realignment. And by summer, the plant was a shell, and my badge did not open any door that still existed. I was 41. I had a mortgage, a wife named Dana who cleans teeth at a dentist's office off the Gulf Freeway, and a daughter Kayla who was about to start community college and be the first person in my whole line to sit in a college classroom. 20 years of thousandths of an inch, and the market had no more use for them. That is a particular kind of quiet a man carries. You do not talk about it. You just get up and find the next thing. I want to sit in that plant for a minute because you cannot understand the rest of it if you think it was just a job I lost. That plant was where I became myself. I walked in at 24 not knowing which end of a caliper to trust, and I walked out at 41 able to feel a machine's health through my boots, through the floor, the way you feel a fever on a child's forehead without a thermometer. There is a pride in that kind of skill that has nothing to do with money, though the money mattered. It is the pride of being genuinely good at a hard, true thing, and of being known for it by the handful of men who could tell the difference. The day they closed it, I did a thing I have never told anybody but Dana. After the break room, after strategic realignment, I went back to my machine, the one I had run for 11 years, and I cleaned it down, wiped the ways, oiled it, left it perfect, the way you leave it at the end of a good shift. There was no shift the next day. There was no next day. But I could not make myself leave that machine dirty for whatever came to haul it off to a container ship. That is the kind of man the app deactivated with one tap at 9:40 at night. A man who oiled a machine he would never touch again, because leaving it right was the only dignity the moment allowed me. So no, I did not slink off. Men like me do not have a great deal of practice slinking off. We have a great deal of practice getting up before dawn and doing the thing right, whether or not anyone is watching. And it turns out that habit does not know the difference between a lathe and a lawsuit. Here is the thing, though. Driving was not new to me when the plant closed. For 3 years before that Friday in the break room, I had been picking up work on the side with one of the grocery delivery apps, nights and weekends, a little extra put away for Kayla's college. The kind of gig where the phone tells you which store, which aisles, which house, and you shop and you drive, and you drop the bags on the porch, and you take a photo to prove you did. And a stranger you will never meet taps 1 to 5 stars, and that is your paycheck and your reputation, both. When the plant went under, the side thing quietly became the only thing. It is not machining. It does not use the thing I spent 20 years becoming. But it was honest work, and it paid something. And by day I looked for the day job that had not come yet, and by night I drove. And I will say this plainly because it is the whole heart of the story, very, very good at it. There is a loneliness to night delivery that I did not expect and came to make a peace with. The city at 11 at night is a different country, emptied out and orange under the lot lights. And you spend it mostly alone in a truck with the radio low, ferrying the small necessities of strangers' lives to dark porches. Milk and diapers and a birthday cake somebody ordered too late. You learn a city that way. Its back streets, which gates stick, which complexes number their buildings like a riddle a child made up. And you learn people a little from the outside, from what they buy at midnight, and the notes they leave taped to the door. I did not love it the way I loved the plant. A man does not love the thing that is holding him over the water the way he loves the thing he was built for. But I respected it, and I respected the people doing it beside me at that hour, because most of them were carrying something. A closed plant, a medical bill, a kid, a fresh start. And none of them were out there at midnight for the fun of it. That is the part the app on my phone never once understood about the fleet of us out in the dark, keeping its promises. We were not a labor cost. We were a couple 100,000 people, each one a whole entire story, holding a company's reputation together one dark porch at a time, for a few dollars and a number made out of stars. Here is a thing about a machinist that the app did not know when it signed me up. We are built out of precision and documentation. My entire working life was measure twice, cut once, and write down what you measured. So when I started delivering, I did it like a machinist. I did not just take the one photo the app required at drop-off. I framed it. House number visible, bag squared up on the mat, timestamp running. I ran a dash camera in my truck, front and rear, the way a lot of drivers do now, because the roads down here will teach you to. I kept my own log, not because anyone told me to, because that is simply who I am, a man 20 years deep in a trade built on proof, on writing down what you measured so nobody could ever tell you different. And the plant, when it came apart, only carved the lesson deeper. The man who keeps the records is the man who does not get erased. Turns out that instinct was worth more than the pension. 6 years I drove for them. Not the plant, that was 20. I mean the app. I drove for the app for 6 years. And across those 6 years, I completed a hair over 11,000 deliveries. And I carried a 5-star rating so close to perfect, it embarrassed me a little. And I want to tell you why that rating mattered. Because if you have never had your work turned into a single public number, you might think a 5-star rating is a small and silly thing to be proud of. It was not small to me. After the plant, after the badge stopped working, that rating was very nearly the only thing on the entire internet with my name attached to it that said, out loud, to anyone who looked, "This man is reliable. This man shows up. This man does it right." I had lost the locker and the nickname and the pension. I still had the 5 stars, They were mine. I had earned every one of them on somebody's porch in the Houston heat. And I did the job right, which in delivery does not mean what people think. Anybody can carry a bag to a door. Doing it right meant the small things nobody tips extra for. It meant reading the note that said, "Please do not ring the bell. The baby is finally asleep," and setting the bags down like they were made of glass. It meant, on the hot days, and in Houston most days are hot days, putting the cold things in the shade and not in the sun. It meant texting a photo so a person working late knew their dinner was safe on the porch and they could stop worrying about the one small thing. There was a woman on one of my regular routes, older, lived alone, and I figured out after a few weeks that her grocery order was pretty much her only visitor most days. So I started knocking, gentle, and waiting the extra minute for her to get to the door, and handing the bags to her directly instead of leaving them, because I could see it cost her something to bend down, and I could see it gave her something to have a person say good evening and mean it. It was 30 seconds. It was nothing. Except one night she told me, at her door, that I was the only person who had said her name out loud all week. And I drove the rest of that route with my jaw set, thinking about how many people are out there that the world has quietly deactivated, and how cheap it is, how nearly free, to treat one of them like they still count. I tell you that not to make myself out a saint. I am nobody's saint. Ask Dana. I tell you because that is the man the algorithm added up to one tapped star and a form email with the word final in it. 6 years of shaded groceries and sleeping babies and a lonely woman's name said out loud, and the machine could not see a single ounce of it. Because the machine was never built to see a man. It was built to count a number and cut a cost. And one night, I became the cost. Now let me tell you about the 4, because this whole thing turns on a number that is, if you stop and think about it for even 1 second, statistically ridiculous. There was a customer. I am not going to give you her name, partly for the legal reasons, and partly because, by the end of this, I found I did not have the appetite to say it like a curse. I will tell you she lived in a nice enough townhouse complex on the west side, that I had delivered to her a handful of times, and that she was, from a driver's point of view, an ordinary stop. What I did not know, what no single driver could have known, because the app in its wisdom shows you nothing about a customer's history, was that this particular customer had discovered a trick. The trick was this. You order your groceries, you let the nice tired man in the truck shop for 2 hours and drive them to your door, and set them down and photograph them. And then, once he is gone, you tap the button that says, "My order never arrived," and the app, terrified of losing a customer, refunds you the entire order, no questions, and the groceries are free. She had done it, I would learn much later, 4 times in 1 month. 4 missing orders in 30 days. Think about that number the way I did, the night it finally clicked, sitting at my kitchen table. If your groceries genuinely failed to arrive 4 times in a single month, you would not quietly click a button for a refund 4 times. You would call the company screaming. You would stop using them. Nobody on earth calmly accepts 4 vanished grocery orders in 4 weeks and keeps ordering. 4 is not the number of a person who has been failed by a service. 4 is the number of a person who has found a hole in a machine and decided to live in it. I knew that number was wrong the way I used to know a machine was wrong 3 days out. But the app did not know it. The app cannot hear a machine going bad. The app can only count stars and process refunds. I put that number together slowly, at my own kitchen table, over more than one night. Because at first, I did not have her history either. I only had mine. But the machinist does not need the whole blueprint to know a part is wrong. He needs one measurement that cannot be true, and then he knows to go back and check everything. 4 was my one measurement that could not be true. Once I saw it, I could not unsee it. The way you cannot unhear a bearing that has started to go. Everything after that was just me, patiently, taking the readings that proved what the bad number had already told me. The night it happened to me, I remember exactly. I had shopped her order, 40-some items, produce and a rotisserie chicken and the heavy stuff, the water, the litter, and I had driven it over in the dark and carried it up in 2 trips and set it down on her mat and squared the bags and taken my photo. House number bright and clear in the frame, 9:18 at night. And I had texted, the way I do, "Your groceries are on the porch. Have a good night." And I had driven home. And at 9:40, before I had even finished washing up, my phone made a sound I had never heard it make. And there was an email. And the email said, my account had been deactivated for a confirmed failure to deliver, effective immediately, and that this decision was final. Final. That was the word that got me. Not because I did not understand a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. A wire crosses, a button gets tapped. It was the word final, delivered by a system that had not asked me a single question, had not looked at my photograph, had not glanced at 6 years and 11,000 deliveries, and a rating that was practically a straight line of perfect. A machine had received 1 tap from one stranger, and in the time it takes to boil an egg, had decided, all by itself, that Wes was a thief, and closed the door, and used the word final. 6 years, 1 hour, no human being anywhere in the loop. I sat at the kitchen table for a long while. Dana came in and read my face and sat down across from me, and I turned the phone around so she could see it, and she read it twice and said, quietly, "They can't do that." And I said, "Apparently they can, and it is already done." And I felt the plant again, that exact feeling, the break room, the strategic realignment, the badge that opened nothing. Erased by a decision made somewhere I could not reach, by people or things that would never have to look me in the eye. Twice in 3 years. I am not ashamed to tell you that a 44-year-old man sat at his kitchen table that night and had to work fairly hard to keep it together in front of his wife. I have thought a lot since about what it means that a person can be turned into a number small enough to delete in an hour. When I was at the plant, if a man was going to be let go, another man had to do it, face to face, and had to carry it home in his own chest that night. And that friction, that human cost of erasing a human, was a kind of protection, even on the days it failed. The machine took the friction out. Now a stranger taps a screen, and an algorithm does the rest, and nobody, anywhere, has to feel the weight of what they did to Wes. Because from where they sit, nothing was done to Wes. A metric was simply updated. That is the quiet danger of the whole shining convenient thing, and I say this as a man who needed the work and was grateful for it. When you make it frictionless to erase a person, you will erase a great many people who did nothing wrong. And you will never feel it, because feeling it was the exact cost you engineered away. The only defense a working man has left against being frictionlessly erased is friction of his own. Records. Proof. A folder so complete that somewhere down the line, one human being has to stop and look and feel the weight after all. That folder is not paperwork. That folder is the last thing standing between you and the word final. But here is where it turns, and it turns because of who I am. And I did not choose to be this. My father made me this. The plant made me this. 20 years of thousandths of an inch made me this. Somewhere in that long, bad hour, underneath the gut punch, the machinist woke up. And the machinist did not feel despair. The machinist felt a very old, very cold, very familiar thing, which was the specific calm that comes over a man like me when I am looking at a system that is out of tolerance, and I know exactly how to find where. Because they had made one mistake, the app and the customer both, and it was the same mistake the market made when it decided a machinist's records did not matter. They assumed I had nothing. They assumed I was what I looked like, a tired middle-aged man in a truck who would rage for a night and then slink off. Because what was he going to do? Sue an app? Hire a lawyer he could not afford to fight a contract he had clicked agree on at a kitchen table? That is the whole engine of it. They processed me as a person who could be erased, because erasing me was cheaper than looking at me. They did not know about the dash cam. They did not know about the photographs, all of them, not just hers. 6 years of squared up bags and bright house numbers, sitting backed up in 3 places because a machinist backs things up in 3 places. They did not know that I had, without ever planning to need it, built over 6 years the single most thoroughly documented delivery history that grocery app had probably ever been unlucky enough to deactivate. And when their own support robot, in the first useless exchange, told me that if I wished to appeal, I would need to follow the documentation policy exactly and submit evidence per the guidelines, I felt something almost like the old pride. Follow the specification exactly. Buddy, you have no idea what you just asked for. So let me tell you what following it exactly looked like. Because this is the part I hope you enjoy as much as I came to. First, I read the policy. All of it. Not the way you click agree, the way a machinist reads a spec. Twice. With a pen. Noting every requirement and every word that could be argued 2 ways. The documentation policy laid out exactly what evidence a driver could submit to contest a failure to deliver claim. Time-stamped proof of drop-off, location data. It practically read like a shopping list of every single thing I already had in triplicate. They had written, without knowing it, a policy that I had been unknowingly complying with, in advance, for 6 years. For the delivery in question, I assembled the file. The drop-off photograph, timestamp 9/18, house number legible, the customer's own doormat and porch light plainly visible, the dash camera footage, front and rear, showing my truck arriving at her complex, showing me carry the bags up, showing me come back empty-handed. All of it stamped with the time and running against the truck's own location. The app's own record of my phone's location, which they provide if you request it, placing me at her address at the exact minute of the photograph. My text message, sent and delivered, telling her the groceries were on the porch. I laid it all out in order, labeled, cross-referenced, a document a stranger could follow from top to bottom and reach only one conclusion. It took me most of a night. It was the most useful I had felt in 3 years. And then, because I am who I am, I did not stop at proving my one delivery. Because the machinist in me had already looked at that number, the 4, and could not leave it alone. A single false claim is a wire crossed. 4 false claims in 1 month from one address is not a wire crossed. It is a pattern, and patterns are the only thing I have ever truly known how to read. So I did the thing the app had never bothered to do about their own customer. I pulled my own 6 years of records, and I found every delivery I had ever made to that address. And I built a file on each one. The photos, the timestamps, the routes, and I laid them side by side, and I looked at the shape of it, and the shape of it was ugly and clear. I could not see her other refunds, of course. I only had my own deliveries. But I did not need her whole file to see the tooth marks. I had photographed groceries on that woman's porch on nights the app's own system, I would later learn, had recorded as failures to deliver. My time-stamped, location-stamped, dash-cam-backed photographs directly contradicted the very claims that her free groceries had been built on. I was not just a driver proving he had done his one job. I had become, without quite meaning to, a witness to a small, ongoing fraud. And I had the evidence sitting in 3 backups because that is simply how I keep things. Now, if this were a movie, the next scene is me marching in somewhere and slamming a folder on a desk and a room going silent. That is not how it went, and I want to be honest about the slow part, because the slow part is where most people quit, and quitting is exactly what the machine is counting on. What actually happened is that I submitted my beautiful file into a support system that was built from the ground up to not have a human read it. I got auto replies. I got a case number. I got a message thanking me for my patience and assuring me that the original decision had been reviewed and upheld. Which was a lie, because no one had reviewed anything. A template had simply been sent. I escalated. I got another template. For 2 weeks, I fed the finest piece of documentation I had ever assembled into what amounted to a shredder with a friendly font. And those 2 weeks were hard, and I will not pretend they were not, because the bills do not care about your case number. Kayla's tuition was due. I picked up shifts unloading trucks at a warehouse, cash where I could get it. The kind of work my body is a little too old for now. And I came home aching. And Dana kept saying, "Maybe just let it go, honey. It is not worth what it is doing to you." And I understood why she said it. But she was wrong. And I knew she was wrong. And it took me a while to find the words for why. It was not about the app anymore. It was about the word final. It was about being erased for the second time by something that would not look at me. If I let this one go, I was going to believe, somewhere I could not afford to believe it, that men like me could just be deleted, and that the records did not matter. And I had spent my whole life on the opposite faith. Those were long weeks. I want to be truthful about the shape of them, because the internet loves the part where the little guy wins, and skips the part where the little guy nearly does not. Where he sits in a parked truck outside a warehouse at 5 a.m, with his hands aching too much to grip, and wonders if his wife is right. Dana was not wrong to want me to stop. She was watching it eat me, and she loves me, and letting it go would have been the same thing, the safe thing, the thing a reasonable man does. I have never been fully reasonable about certain things, and being erased is one of them. Kayla's tuition came due in the middle of it, and I paid it with warehouse cash and a credit card I did not want to use. And I did not tell her that the man who was so proud she was going to college had just been fired by the phone. A father keeps some weather off his kids if he can. She found out later, and she was angry at me for not telling her. And then she was angry for me, which is a different and a better thing. And she said, "Dad, you are going to fight this, right? Tell me you are going to fight this." And something about my daughter needing me to be the man who fights and not the man who gets erased put a piece of the steel back in my spine that 2 weeks of templates had worn down. So I did not quit. Not out of some noble fire, I want to be clear. Mostly out of a stubbornness my mother used to call my worst quality, right up until the day it became my best. I kept the file open on the kitchen table where I would see it every morning next to the coffee. The way I once kept a part I could not seat on the bench where I would have to keep looking at it until the answer came. The answer always comes if you refuse to leave the room. That is not inspiration. That is just how machines and companies and stubborn men actually work. So I stopped and I thought, the way you stop and think when you have been forcing a part that will not seat and you finally set down the hammer. I had been submitting my evidence as a driver, begging to be reinstated. And the machine did not care about a driver begging to be reinstated, because reinstating me cost them something, and ignoring me cost them nothing. I was speaking the wrong language to the wrong department. So I asked myself the machinist's question, the only one that has ever mattered. Not who do I want to yell at, but where in this system is the pressure that will actually move the part? And the answer, when it came, was almost funny. The one thing that grocery app truly cared about, the one thing that would make a human being sit up and read every page I had, was not my innocence. It was their money. I had been framing myself as a wrongly accused worker. What I actually was, to the only department that had power here, was a witness to a customer who was stealing from them. 4 orders a month, refund after refund, and had been for who knows how long. They did not care that I was honest. They cared very much that they were being robbed, and I could prove by whom. So I rebuilt the whole thing. Same evidence, different reader. I stopped writing to driver support, and I found, buried in their corporate structure, the channels that deal with fraud and trust and safety. The people whose job is protecting the company's own money. And I wrote them a cover letter that did not say, "Please reinstate me." It said, "You have a customer systematically claiming non-delivery to obtain refunds. Here is time-stamped, location verified, camera-backed proof that at least 4 such claims were false. Here is the pattern. Here is the address. And by the way, your automated system responded to this fraud by deactivating the one driver who had the evidence to catch it." I sent it by their proper fraud channel. I sent a copy by certified mail to their corporate office, because a certified letter has to be signed for by a human hand, and I wanted a human hand in this if it was the last thing I did. And then, for the first time, I waited without expecting a template. 9 days later, my phone rang. An actual phone call. An actual human voice. A woman named Renee from their trust and safety team. And she had read every page. All of it. She told me later it had come up through the fraud channel, flagged as unusually complete. And that when she opened it, she had assumed it was a lawyer's work and had been surprised to find it was just a driver. Just a driver. I let that one go. She was kind about it, and she was thorough, which I respected more than kindness. And she asked me careful questions, and I gave her careful answers. And at the end of that first call, she said the sentence I had been waiting 3 weeks and, in a way, 3 years to hear. She said, "Mr. Wes, I am so sorry. This should never have happened, and I can see exactly how it did, and I am going to fix it. Here is the resolution, and I am going to give it to you plainly, without fireworks, because plain is what it deserves, and plain is what made it real." They reinstated me. Fully. My 6 years and my 11,000 deliveries and my rating came back like they had never been touched. Because in the end, the records held, the way records do. They paid me back for the weeks I had been locked out, the earnings I had lost, which they calculated from my own history, the history they had tried to erase, and then had to use to make me whole. And I have always found a quiet justice in that. And the customer, the one with the number 4, had her account closed. Not by me. I never touched her. The company closed it themselves, once a human being finally looked at the pattern I had laid out. Because it turned out, I had only seen the corner of it that touched my own deliveries. And the rest of it, once they went looking, was worse than 4. Renee told me a few things, in the careful way a professional tells you only what they are allowed to. And the gist was that once a human being finally pulled the thread I had handed them, the pattern ran back a good long way and touched more drivers than me, other tired people in other trucks who had been deactivated or docked or quietly bled of their ratings over deliveries they had absolutely made. None of them had built a file. Why would they? You do not photograph your whole life until the day something tries to erase it. I happened to be the one who already had, by temperament, by trade, by the plain accident of being a man who cannot leave a record unkept. And so I was the one whose folder could not be waved away. And that is the piece I think about most, honestly, more than my own back pay. There were others. There are always others. The machine had been quietly doing to a lot of people exactly what it did to me. And the only reason it got caught this one time was that it happened, by pure luck, to pick the wrong guy, the one with the dash cam and the 3 backups and the stubbornness his mother warned him about. I did not just get myself reinstated. I got a light switched on in a room full of people who never knew the others were in there with them. I am prouder of that than of anything I have ever made out of metal, and I have made some good things out of metal. And I want to stop right here and tell you the truest thing in this whole story, because it is the part I am actually proud of, more than the file. I felt no joy about that woman. I want to be honest. I had spent some ugly nights imagining her caught in those 2 weeks in the shredder. But when it actually happened, when Renee told me the account was closed, I did not feel triumph. I felt tired, and I felt relieved, and I felt something almost like sadness that a person had done that 4 times a month to strangers in trucks who were mostly 1 bad month away from her own kind of desperation. I do not know her story. I never will. I only know that the truth held, and that it held because I wrote it down, and that is enough. A man does not need to stand on somebody to stand up straight. My father taught me that before I ever touched a machine. Let me tell you what happened next, because the next part is the reason I tell this at all. I kept driving, for a while, on my own terms, and eventually the day job did come. A machine shop across town that needed a man who could hold a tolerance and train the young guys. And I took it, and my hands remember everything, it turns out. But the driving left me with something I did not expect, which was a whole lot of other drivers finding me, once word of what happened got around the way it does. New drivers, mostly. Kids, some of them, and folks like me starting over, at an age when starting over is not supposed to be the plan. And they would ask me the same question, some version of it. What do I do so this never happens to me? So now, one Saturday a month, in the back room of a public library not far from where the plant used to stand, I run a little class, free, for gig drivers. It is not much. Coffee in a big steel urn and a couple dozen folding chairs, and a man who used to make parts to 1/1000th of an inch, teaching people how to keep a record. I teach them to run a dash cam. I teach them to frame the drop-off photo with the house number in it. I teach them to back it up in 3 places, because one place is not a backup, it is a hope. I teach them that the tap of a stranger can erase you in an hour, and that the only thing that survives that hour is what you wrote down. Mostly, I teach them the thing it took me 3 years and 2 erasures to learn all the way down. The man who keeps the records is the man who does not get deleted. I will give you one of them, because he is the reason I keep renting that library room. A young guy, maybe 22, came to the class one Saturday looking like he had not slept. And afterward, he hung back until the others left, And he told me he was 3 days from losing his car, which was also his job, over a customer complaint he swore was a lie. And he had nothing. No camera, no photos, no records. Just his word against a tap. And his word was worth exactly nothing to the machine. He was about to be erased the way I was erased. And he was a decade younger and a lot more scared. And he had a baby at home. I could not undo what he had not recorded. But I sat down with him and we reconstructed what we could. Bank timestamps, gas receipts, a text here and there, the scraps a person leaves behind without meaning to. And we built the best small file we could out of the wreckage. And I showed him the fraud channel and how to write the letter that talks about their money instead of his innocence. It was not as clean as mine, but it was enough, barely. And he kept his car. And before he left, he asked me why I was doing this for a stranger. And I told him the truth, which is that somebody has to be the one who keeps the light on in that room. And I had the switch in my hand, and my father did not raise a man who walks past a switch. Now that kid runs a dash cam and frames his photos with the house number in them, and backs everything up in 3 places. And he brought 2 other drivers to the class the next month. And that is the whole point. That is the entire machine I am actually trying to build now. One that makes it a little bit harder to erase a person who did the work. It will never be as satisfying as a part that comes off the lathe perfect. But it holds a tolerance of its own, in its way. And I have come to be all right with that. Kayla graduated, by the way, first in my whole line to do it. She sat me and Dana down in the front row in a hot gymnasium and walked across a stage. And I do not mind telling you, the machinist came apart a little in that fold-in chair. She is doing something with computers now that I only half understand. Systems, she says, keeping things from failing. And I laughed the first time she explained it because I thought, that is the family trade after all. That is exactly the family trade. We keep the thing from failing, and we write down why. So that is the whole story, and it comes down to a number. And it was never really 6 years, and it was never really final. It was 4. 4 missing orders that were not missing, caught by a man they thought had nothing, because a machinist keeps his records. And because somewhere in a bad hour at a kitchen table, I decided that being erased twice was one time too many. And I set down the hammer, and I asked where the pressure actually was. And I put it there, in order, in triplicate, exactly to spec. Here is what I would ask you, and I mean it, because I still turn it over. Was I right to spend 3 weeks and a stack of certified mail on a fight over a grocery delivery, when Dana was telling me to let it go and the warehouse was breaking my back? Or is some principle worth more than what it costs you, right up until it is not? Where is your line? And have you ever been erased by something that would not look at you? A company, an algorithm, a system? And did you have your records when it counted? Tell me about it in the comments. And drop your state and your age while you are there, because I am genuinely curious who is out there listening tonight. And how many of you are 1 bad hour away from needing to prove you were exactly where you said you were?